Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 5 of the anime series Rokka no Yuusha. And this episode was insane because it was largely an info dump. You know, all of these so-called Braves of the Six Flowers, all 7 of them, are really sort of hashing out their suspicions. They're introducing themselves, and they're either tempering the flames of, sort of indecision and suspicion, or they're inflaming them. They're engulfing themselves and each other with this suspicion as to who could be the air quotes fake. And the odds-on favorite for everybody seems to be Flamey, with the exception of Adlet. He is very much, even with all of her story coming to the fore, we finally have answers to that effect. What exactly is her impetus, what her origins are, and all these kinds of things. And you would think that she would be really, the chief amongst them all, to be the henpecked fake, working in league with the demon god. And the question I have in taking all of the information we get in this episode, is just, can we even assume that the fake is actually in league with the demon god? I have this sneaking suspicion that we're being misled as to the fake being actually evil or being ominous, and I hope that's wrong. I hope we actually do find that one of these characters is a turncoat that will have to be defeated. Maybe it's the demon god, him or herself, incarnate something along those lines, or one of their minions. I do hope that we will come to that realization, and we won't sort of have a double negative reveal, an O. Henry reveal, where we thought all this time one of them was going to turn out to be evil, and actually they're all good, and they all have their different motivations for being there, and whoever this air quotes fake is either there by accident, thinks that they were chosen when they weren't, or has a different reason for being there. And that is, in the case of Flamey, could it be that she's not really a genuine chosen brave, but she's there because she realized the sort of, ramifications of her choosing and being bred and all this stuff? I mean, getting down to the brass tacks, she's a half-breed human and fiend. She was born of a human father, but a fiend mother, I guess. They killed the father. She was there for the sole purpose of becoming the Saint of Gunpowder. They kind of created their own sainthood. It's not one that Mora is even, familiar with. And she was there to try to help make, the success of the demon god's rebirth happen. And maybe she began to sort of become bitter and realize all the lives she had taken, what that really amounted to, what, maybe she was beginning to feel negative about doing these things and having no parentage, or a dishonest one. Maybe she began to have this passion build within her against the demon god. And so she's there without being a brave, an official brave, but she does bear a mark, so we have to sort of cast that to one side at the moment. One thing I noticed throughout the entirety of these, sort of introductory discussions, certain of these people are talking about, the brave markings, having been chosen as a brave. You have Adlet, Goldov, and Hans, respectively, using that terminology, whereas you seem to see Mora and Nashitania, Shamo, and even Flamey to a degree, they don't talk about it as far as when they were chosen. They refer to it, if they refer to it at all. I don't think Flamey actually does, and Nashitania doesn't, but we've seen, at least purportedly, how Nashitania came to be chosen as brave when she showed up to, fish Adlet out of that cell and everything. But I mean, they alternatively use the terminology when the demon god awoke. And I'm wondering if there's some kind of hinting there that either, what is being unspoken, or the way somebody is speaking about that realization, being chosen, suddenly having the branding of the Braves of the Six Flowers. Is there some hint along those lines in the dialogue to suggest which of these are being disingenuous? I don't know. There's also the unfamiliarity with the barrier. I mean, even Hans, who, we find out he's an assassin for hire, and he actually went to sort of negotiate funding for this trip and everything like that. He spoke to the king directly, and he still didn't know about the barrier, or at least he didn't pay attention to whatever he was being told by Mora. You'd think she is the most interesting one to me out of all of these characters, probably in the essence that I didn't know anything about her, being the saint of mountains we heard about, but leader of the All Heavens temple or whatever it is. And actually their temple, the whole impetus behind what they do, is to keep an eye on the saints of this world. These people with powers, of which there are, I guess, 78, as Mora says. And she knows the names, faces, all that stuff, whereabouts of all of them. She's memorized them all. And she's actually seemingly solely responsible for Shamo in the midst of all of this. She actually replaced, she says, Ryo, the Sun Saint. And I find that interesting because we just found out in the previous episode, or the one previous to that, that this Ryora actually went missing. Is so far missing, and we don't know what happened to her. It's assumed that the Brave Killer, who is said to be Flamey, might have taken her out. But she has already admitted that wasn't the case. This was not somebody she was familiar with. So there's a lot of mixed information and stories going on here. You don't know who exactly to trust. And that's kind of the crux of this episode. It's, as I say, it's either inflaming the distrust or tempering it in certain estimations. You think Adlet's going to come out clear through the other side by the end of the episode, and Hans then begins to realize as they're talking, they saved this little nugget of truth for last, how exactly Adlet got into this temple. And he's basically saying, Hans, that is to say, it's impossible. You couldn't have gotten inside. Once those doors are open, they stay open. So if this barrier was activated with those doors closed, that's nigh impossible. You must have had something to do with that Adlet, And so all of a sudden, that wedge of suspicion is laying flatly at Adlet's door because basically Hans is saying he's familiar with the creation of such doors, these seal masters or seal master, whatever he was, to create all these different kinds of, doors and barriers that couldn't be broken into or would be very troublesome for somebody like Hans, who is this assassin who's very cat-like. He's talking to Shamo about why he has that nyan, sound effect that he has when he talks, this impediment, if you will. But it's all part of the character's nature and his studying of the cat-like reflexes. He's kind of cat burglar-esque, and it's all intriguing that. Now, Shamo is one hell of an interesting character. She actually, her design reminds me of a character whose name escapes me from Dot Hack Legend of the Twilight, but like the dark side version, the complete antithesis. And she is primeval. I mean, she's like schizo or something. She's talking about wanting to kill and or torture Flamey because of the distrust she feels, and she's actually kind of getting excited and about to get off on the idea of whipping her, or chaining her up, or doing whatever. Like, just, it's insane, this little kid. And again, with that lacking in the terminology of, when was I chosen? And in her case, she says, when the demon god awoke. And I'm wondering, could we be misled as to any of these characters? I mean, for all we know, there could be multiple fakes in the troupe. Maybe not all of them are actually chosen braves. Any one of them could have found a genuine brave, killed them, slaughtered them like, Flamey is said to have done numerous times, copied the marking off the corpse and just shown up, especially with this lacking knowledge of how the barrier could be activated, how it could be shut down. And adding insult to injury, the reason Shamo is so bloodthirsty is because the only way to shut this barrier down, no fiend, nothing inhuman could have activated. A human would have had to. And there's some talk about, well, with Flamey being a half-breed human fiend, could she have? And some think she could. Adlet doesn't think so. But there's that, just insane question of who could have activated this thing. And whomever is responsible, either they willingly shut it down or they're put to death, and that's what shuts it down. And that's pretty much the cliffhanger we leave off with. And it's like, mind blown, because, again, talking about the sainthood and Flamey being the saint of gunpowder, Mora is familiar with all of them. Why would she have to be so familiar with all of them? She's talking about keeping their powers in check, making sure there's no abuse of power. But I mean, so much of the origins of these characters and what the steps, through which they traveled to get to this point can be called into suspicion. And it's riveting to me, because it's like, which one of them is it going to be? I mean, there are moments where when I'm, reading the dialogue, the subtitles of whatever somebody's explaining, I will have shifting emotions as to who I think the likeliest choice could be. By the end of the episode, I'm just thinking, I mean, in terms of who do I think the guilty party could be, who do I think the fake could be, the two likely scenarios I'm sort of gunning for is Adlet being given this branding, of the six flowers under suspicious means. He even calls that into question. His meeting Nashitania, and he calls back on that. He reflects back on how strange that all was. And I began to assume, one of my speculations has been, could Nashitania, for being so smitten with him and so taken by him, and feeling like she could let her hair down around him. I think I've spoken about this in a previous video. Could she have utilized whatever sainthood powers she has to fake a marking of, the Braves of the Six Flowers on him to assure that he'd be taken along for the ride? And could he be there thinking he's the genuine article, and he's just not, but because of his heroic nature and his moralistic nature and his nature to want to, save Flamey and everything, he has an actual good heart. He's a man of conscience. Maybe he has a rightful place there, even though he may or may not have been genuinely chosen. We can only assume, because we haven't seen any of the other choosings, the depictions of people finding these markings on them. We don't know what that appears to be for each of these characters. We don't know if that was all the same for them, or if his was the unique one that we were just meant to be under the assumption in witnessing it as viewers of the series. This is how it goes, and that has to be it. It has to be locked that he is the one. Perhaps the display we saw of him getting that branding was completely false to how it actually is supposed to happen. And/or, that's one speculation theory I have in the works. The other one being, as I mentioned, with Flamey, given her history and what we find, the revelations we find out about her, and she's got the horn, air quotes. That's what Adlet calls it, but it just looks like she's got, I thought maybe she fell asleep on a half-chewed, like lifesaver candy or something. But in any case, he calls it a horn, and she, her one eye is all red, and it's like a pulsing heart or something otherworldly in her one eye. And giving all of this consideration, this idea that she was the brave killer. She was killing braves because that was what her purpose was. That was what she was bred for, very literally. That was the purpose. And could she have, because of the human tendencies, because of the human side, being sired by a human and a fiend, could those emotions have come to the fore? She's very plain stated. She's not very emotional, but I'm thinking internally, she has emotions. She has regrets for the lives she's taken, and she began to think better of it. She's on the attack because she's trying to preserve her own life, self-defense, because nobody's going to take her at her word that she's suddenly thought this over and thought better of it. So, of course, she has to protect herself at this point, and at this point she's determined to take down the demon god for what he put her through, for all that strife and turmoil she's had to live through, taking lives unfairly, for the purpose of the demon god. It was all so the demon god could be reborn. Who better to put the blame on for forcing her to live this life, this murderous, strife-laden life? And so those are my two top choices as far as, Shimo's up there too, just for her murderous intent, her very bloodthirsty intent. And Mora in her own way with Hans alongside her because of their unfamiliarity with the barrier. There could have been minced words. There could have been misunderstanding and not knowing exactly how this was all going to play out. And that's only if you can actually trust, Chief Lauren back in the temple previous, who gave them all this information. How can we trust any of this by the end of the episode? And that's exactly what's keeping me glued to the frickin' screen. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below after the info dump craziness that unfolded in the discussions in this episode. Who are you pegging for the fake, if anybody at all. You know, how did you like the episode? If you didn't like it, tell me why not in the comments below. Love having the conversation. We can, you know, agree to disagree and everything like that. Just love having the discussion about such an intriguing series as this. And so yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.